Hi everyone, and welcome to the tutorial series for the Animal Behavior Kit. In this video we're going to be taking a look at the general improvements that have been made for the 1.3 update. And if we go back to our slide here, we see that we're going to be taking a look at the inactive options for the ground animal, the random appearance options that I've added, and finally the advanced engage mode, which is experimental but still I think a really cool option to consider. Then we're going to be taking a look at the SpawnLoot component. There's been a small change, and I've added a loot table. And then finally, we'll take a look at the Troubleshooter BP. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into Unreal. And before we start taking a look at the options here, I do want to mention a few things that you've noticed. Once you upgrade to 1.3, you're going to see that the name of the project and the icon has changed. You can see the new name here, Animal Behavior Pro. And if you missed my announcement video more than a month ago, basically I am splitting the Animal Behavior Kit into two versions. There's going to be a Pro version, which will include everything that you've had, plus the brand new advanced taming system and some future updates. And then there's going to be a core version of ABK, which will have just the most basic options, the core options, without the taming system and some of the other more advanced movement modes. So if you owned the Animal Behavior Kit, if you bought it before the 1.3 update, you have been automatically upgraded to the Animal Behavior Kit Pro for free. So that's going to be one of the big options and big changes that you see as soon as you open it. It's going to be Animal Behavior Kit Pro. And when you look here under your content folder, you'll see that we actually have two different folders. And again, that's because we have the Animal Behavior Kit, which would be eventually everything that comes with the core version. Plus, in addition, you'll have the Advanced Taming Kit that is its own separate thing. We're going to be taking a look at the Advanced Taming System in detail in a future video, but I just wanted to mention here that for all other videos, the structure that you see where I'm looking at all the blueprints is exactly the same. Nothing has changed. The folders are the same. So if I'm here in Animal Behavior Kit, you'll see that I have blueprints, and if I click on blueprints, you'll see the same folders here. Right, I can go to characters, I can go to animals, ground animals. Everything is pretty much exactly the same, and I'm even following a very similar structure under the advanced taming. So the point is, if you look at other tutorials in the list, you should not feel lost because the blueprints have the same names, are in the same places. It's just that now you have an additional folder under content. Okay? All right. So obviously, before the tutorial started, I created a really quick test level, and I put about 150 animals here. We have males and females all in different rows. And this is to showcase the new inactive options. I've shown this before on a previous video, but I want to go ahead and take a quick look here. Right now, if I click on play, you'll see that the animals are all just standing there. They're all active because they're always running. That's the option I have as a baseline. And you'll see that I have about 60 frames per second. It's kind of hard to see, 58 to 60 frames per second. Is more or less what I'm seeing here. And if I go ahead and select them all, and I'm doing this kind of quickly, there's no point showing every single step here, and I go all the way down to setup general, we're going under simulation details. Make sure that we are in run on proximity, which by the way is the default. And then you'll see that we have a new section called inactive options. So remember, when you use run on proximity, the animal will do a trace to try and find the player nearby. If it cannot find the player, it'll go inactive. And this is the radius that it'll use for the trace to determine whether there's a player nearby or not. I've made the radius super small, only 1,000 units, so we can see the effect while we're very close. Typically, you will not see this unless the animals are really far, which of course should not affect your game. You also notice that if you open the inactive options on your project, these three options are enabled by default. So by default, if you don't even watch this video, if you just use it, your animal should be quite performant, much more than in 1.2. But again, I just wanted to show step by step just to give you an idea of each option, right? So right now, if they run on proximity and I click on play, you'll see that nothing seems to happen, right? They're still there, and I'm still getting about, if I make it bigger, about 60 frames per second. And you'll notice that it really doesn't seem like nothing actually happened. And that's because they are inactive, as a matter of fact, which means that they're just staying in place, but nothing else is ticked on, right? So now if I go back and I select all of my animals, oops, and I go back to the options and say the first one, make them invisible while inactive, and I click on play, and it takes a second here, you'll see that now they start disappearing. And now we go from, just with that one option, which is new, we go from 60 frames per second to about 90 frames per second, 90 some frames per second. You can see there on the right hand corner, right? So just by making them inactive and hiding them. But we can do better than that, right? We can go back here and say, okay, well, I want them to be invisible, but I want to disable collision. And I'm not going to do each one in steps. And I want the actors to stop ticking. Collision, even if they're not rendering, if collision is enabled, Unreal is still doing checks to make sure that things are not hitting them, right, through the physics system. So we just disable the collision entirely. That saves some performance, and we actually make the actor tick stop. And right now, the ground animals don't really have a lot going on in tick. They're basically rotating the HUD towards the player's camera, you know, the name or the nameplate. And even then, we just want to make sure that they stop ticking. So those are, now we're going to the default, right? So we went from 60 frames per second, which was kind of the way it was in 1.2, to now, if I go there, you'll see that we are, I would say, pretty much at 120, 118, 119 frames per second. So we basically doubled our frame rate with 150 animals, from 60 to 119. And that is the default that the animals have. Basically doubling your frame rate. And actually, the more animals you have in your scene, the more drastic the difference, right? So I only have 150. The only reason I'm not showing more is because it'll take even longer when you hit play and to make the changes. But if you have 500 animals, you'll see a huge difference in performance. I do want to mention that there's one more option that is off by default, and it's Stop AI Logic. So Stop AI Logic means that the actual behavior tree will stop. And then once the animal becomes active again, the entire behavior tree will restart. The reason this is off is because if you're using any systems like the group mode, for example, the grouping system where they're following their leader, or the need system or the breeding system, anything like that, all that logic, if you want to preserve that logic, while the animal is inactive, you can still do that with these options ticked. If you stop the AI logic and you restart it, that's going to have some consequences when it comes to that logic. So if you had the need system, you would basically turn it off and restart it. So the animals will start as if they just spawned when it comes to the need system. So if you really need the most performance and you're not really using those systems, I would say go ahead and tick Stop AI Logic. It'll give you even more performance. If you think these three are enough, I would say leave this off, and that would give you the best, overall behavior when it comes to the animals. Okay? All right. So let's go back to the slides here, and the second thing we're going to look at is the random appearance. And this actually came from a user on Discord as a suggestion. Oops, keep clicking off for some reason. And I'm just going to go ahead and deselect everything here. And this is very simple, by the way. I'm just going to select one animal here. And if I go all the way to the top under Setup Behavior, you'll see that we have a new section here called Random Appearance. If you go ahead and expand it, we have two different categories. We have a random size Boolean, and then a range, min and max, and a randomized material boolean, and then a list of materials. So it's really very simple. On begin play, based on the options that you have here, the animal will either have a different scale, will change in scale, and will pick a random material from the list. And remember, these are percentages, so 1 means 100%, and 1.2 in this case means 120%. So this is a range. So basically on begin play, every single animal of the males will go between 100% of its original mesh size to 120% of its original mesh size. And because we're saying randomized material, they're going to pick one of these 4 random materials. And this is the same case if I select the females. The females have the same option, except the range is between 0.9 and 1.1. So they can go up, they can go slightly less than 100% to 90%, to 110%, and they can select a different material here. So what that basically means is if I just actually just select them all again, and I am going to disable the proximity system so I can show you what I mean here. I'm going to simply say that they should always run. Click on save, and if I click play here, once it finishes saving, you'll see that the appearance of the animals is slightly different. Notice in the males and the females how, like, look at this one, it's a little bit lighter than this one, and the size itself is a little different. You see, this doe right here is slightly smaller, this doe right here is a little bit bigger, and the same thing for the males. You see that the materials are a little bit different. Now, you can put any material you want. In my case, I made very, very small differences. Like, look at this guy here, for example. So a little bit more on the yellow side compared to this guy right here. And this guy's a little bit darker. So you can obviously do whatever you want with the materials, but I find that making the values small is really what makes it look more realistic. So you'll notice that the size is about between 20 to 30% size difference, right? And then the materials are all very, very similar. So you could go crazy. So you can grab this guy, for example, just to prove a point here. And you can say, actually, I want this guy to be between 3 and 5 times the size. And if I were to click play here, well, we have a giant buck that just decided to appear in the middle of the scene, as you can see here, right? So feel free to play with these values. What I have here is very small differences to give you, in my opinion, a natural look, but you can go ahead and make any changes you want. And by the way, you can turn off these options here, obviously, by the booleans, if you don't want the materials or the size to appear. All right. And finally, we're going to be taking a look at the advanced engage mode. And I want to stress that this is an experimental feature. This is the last thing I've added. And the reason it's experimental is because it has not been tested with every single combination, and I can't guarantee that everything's going to work, you know, perfectly, right? It's there. I would say use it if you think it's going to benefit your project. Otherwise, if you really want to make sure and you're happy with the way things are, just stick to the regular system. So here's the idea. Let's again select an animal here. And if we go to behavior, you'll see that we have a new option called engage method. And if you go down, you'll see that we have 2 options: use engage tags, which is the default, or use engage map. And again, I'm stressing that this is experimental. With engage tags, this is what the engage system that we've had before. We can select an engage behavior for the animal. In this case, it's ignore, but you can do flee, attack, etc. And then you can give specific tags that the animal will be looking for. And once one of these tags is found, the animal will engage, and it will use the engage behavior here, which means ignore in this case. However, if we use the new system, the engage map, it will ignore the engage tags, and instead we'll use this new option here called engage map, obviously. And if I open it up here, you'll see something different. We, instead of having a list of tags, we have a list of tags, but for each individual tag, we have our own engage behavior. So this gives you a lot more control, because now you can say, for example, for any animal that has the tag ABK Predator, I want him to flee. But if you see the player, maybe you want to say, why don't you just ignore the player? Or maybe you want to attack the player, right? So you can see here how now, and you can add as many tags as you want. You can get super specific with animals. You can tell an animal to attack a rabbit, but run away from a bear, but ignore a wolf, you know, whatever, right? So you can get really, really complicated here. And the way this works is that I've hard-coded a priority system for the behaviors. And that's the way it is now. So right now, flee has the biggest priority. If the animal detects several different tags, if one of them is flee, the animal will simply flee. That behavior will take priority. So say the animal is attacking, let's say that there's a spider attacking a rabbit, but then a bear approaches, and the bear, they're supposed to run away from the bear. The spider could either attack the rabbit or run away from the bear. The spider will run away from the bear. That's the more natural behavior, and that basically overrides everything. The second in command, or second in line, would be the attack. So say that it detects a few tags. One tag means attack, the other tag means ignore or hide or defend. Attack will take priority. And then after that, then whichever behavior they see first, that's really what's going to happen, right? So that's kind of the general idea here. And I've actually created a map to showcase the behavior. So let's go to, let me save here, and let me just show you the map I'm talking about. So if you go to the maps under Animal Behavior Kit, there is a new map called Advanced Engage. That's just an example of what I mean. And you'll see that in this map, it's a fairly small map. We have the deer. And if I go here, you can see that we are using the advanced behavior. And we say, oops, actually, let's just make sure that we change that. So right now, okay, so I think I left it like that. I have to make a change. So right now, if I select all the does, you can see that right now they're using the engage tags. We're gonna make sure that they use the engage map. And the engage map tells them to flee from the predators, any predators, but ignore the player. That's gonna be the deer. If we go to the spiders here, you see that the spiders are using again the map. They're going to attack any prey, which would be the deer, ignore the player, we're going to be walking around, ignore other spiders in the level, but flee from the bears. And finally, for the bears, they are going to again use the engage map, and the engage map says ignore other bears, ignore the player, and attack the spider. Notice that the bears do not have a tag for the deer or the regular prey tag. So the reason I do this setup is when I hit play and we start walking around, you'll see the spiders try to attack the deer. But if they see a bear nearby, they're actually just going to run away. And that behavior wasn't possible with the original system. So if I click play here, I'm going to go ahead and make this big. You'll see that we have now these spiders are following the deer and they're attacking, which is obviously what they have. They're completely ignoring me, by the way. But you see that now they're running away because they saw the bear. So you can see here, the bear is only attacking the spider. So you can see here. This spider right here is trying to get the deer, and immediately you can see this guy is running away. So it's kind of hard to see, but the behavior is there, right? I would suggest you come to this map, you play around with the values. If you have other animals in your project, bring him to this level and try to add the complicated behavior, just so you can see if you really like this interaction. But again, that is kind of the purpose of this map, is to show you the different behaviors that you can achieve using a map. All right. And if we go back to our slide here, the Despawn Loot system, this is going to be very, very quick. We've added a loot table, so I'm going to go back to the test level real quick. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete most of these females here. We don't need that many, and most of the males as well. All right. And I'm gonna grab this guy here, and I'm going to add the component for loot, CompSpawnLoot. And you've had this component before, by the way, but there have been some changes. So before, you used to be able to just say, when this animal dies, spawn a actor class, and it was just a single actor class. Now instead, what you have is a loot table. So click on the plus sign here, and you'll see that we have two options. The first one, if you click on the drop down, is basically a search for any actor class. So let's just look for pickup, and let's just go ahead and say pickup for prey right here, and this is the % chance to spawn. Okay, so 1 is 100% chance, 0 is 0% chance, 0.5 is obviously 50% chance to spawn. So if I click play here, you see the buck. I'm just gonna go ahead and kill the guy, and as soon as he dies, maybe 10 seconds before he despawns, he will then spawn the prey class. And you can see that it didn't spawn it exactly on top. It spawned it in a radius around it. And I go ahead and grab this guy. And that radius is basically what you see here, the spawn range, 250. And you can always align it to the ground. So obviously the whole point of this loot table is that you can add more and more actor classes. So I don't know. Pick up, say, oops. And we'll do Predator. But Predator will be only 50% chance, for example. I should have probably just made him die quickly instead of waiting the 10 seconds there. Oh, there you go. But you can see that the prey is always going to spawn, and the predator only has a 50% chance to spawn. So I could keep repeating this exercise, and eventually you'll see that this is just following the % chance to spawn. So the idea here is that you can add many different items with different percentages here, including some rare items, maybe 0.1%, that'll be 10% chance to spawn, or 0.05, that'll be 5% chance to spawn. And that way you can create many different items that can spawn from the same animal. All right. Okay. And finally, we're going to be taking a look at the Troubleshooter. And the Troubleshooter, just to give you some context, is basically my way of helping you get better support for the Animal Behavior Kit. I do get a lot of emails and DMs on Discord asking many questions, and what I've noticed is after all these months, right, is that there are several questions that keep popping up, right? Things like, hey, my animal is not moving, why is that? Or, hey, my animal is not going inactive, or it's not attacking, or it's not looking for food or something, right? And what I've done is, after giving the same advice many times, I figured, hey, it takes time for you guys to write me an email, for me to see it, respond, write back and forth. Even on Discord, which I'm pretty active, it can still take you some time. What if I could help you eliminate some of these very basic problems from the get-go, from the editor, right? And that's what the whole point is for the troubleshooter. So if you go to the animal behavior kit and you go to blueprints, you'll see that we have a blueprint called BP ABK Troubleshooter. Okay, and if we come here, we're gonna put this guy in the level, and I'm gonna make a few changes here on purpose to show you what I mean. Say that you created a brand new level and you forgot to add the navigation mesh bounds, right? That means that the animal simply cannot move, right? If you don't have a nav mesh, the animal won't be able to move, right? So for some reason, when you hit play, the animals aren't moving, then you say, okay, well, drag this guy to your scene, and you can click on Run Troubleshooter, or you can click on Play, either way. And when you do this, you'll get a little message here with some errors. Right now it's saying player tag not found, nav mesh bounds not found, and then it gives you some other options about the player capsule and the collision not being set correctly. So nav mesh bounds not found. Okay, so we don't have any nav meshes. So you can go here and say, okay, nav mesh, bounds volume. You center this guy and then you can scale it. For example. And now if we go back to the troubleshooter and we click on Run Troubleshooter, notice that this is now green. Nav mesh bounds found. It's going to be green. So basically anything that you see in red is going to be an issue that you should be aware of. And right now it's saying player tag not found, and it's obviously because there's no player in the scene. So again, it's very similar. Say that I'm going to do this on purpose. If I come back and I open one of the player characters and I go to the tags and I remove my ABK player tag, I'm just going to make it slightly different here. And I click on play. Notice that everything is green except the player tag was not found. So if the player tag isn't found, then the proximity system won't work. They won't react properly because they basically can't see the player. So the best way to use this is put it in your scene and hit play, right? And in this case, it will say player tag not found. And then you can say, okay, my character doesn't have the correct tag. And then you can come here, add the correct tag, ABK player. And now if I come back and I hit play, everything is in green. So you can see player tag found, nav mesh found, the capsule component is of type pawn for the player, that's important, and the player's collision for pawn is set to block. All those things are correct. Notice at the bottom that I have, note a link to the complete troubleshooter is printed in the output log. And that's also important. So I've actually created a more detailed guide for the troubleshooter that URL will be printed here in the output log. So if I click play, you'll see here at the bottom that I have troubleshooter, and there's a link to a Google document right here that you can actually open, and I obviously have it open right here, that takes you to a troubleshooting guide with basically the same questions that you've had before, but maybe a bit more detail. Right, so my animals are not finding water. Okay, well, why could that be? And you can come here and you can see my animals are not finding food or animals, etc. And it'll try to explain to you what's going on. My custom animals are not doing damage to me when it attacks. And then it'll give you step by step some of the things that you should check to make sure that things are set up correctly. So that's pretty much it, guys. Again, it's just a way for me to help you debug some of the common problems that you may find when you're using ABK and you find yourself either creating new levels or migrating or changing your character. Obviously, if you still have any issues, clearly. You can DM me via Discord or email me at the email that you see right here. Let me just flash that real quick. CookieGameStudios@gmail.com. Okay guys, that's it for this tutorial. In the next video, we're going to be taking a look at the animal spawners. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you in the next video.